Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Nawfal. I work on Uport, the identity platform at ConsenSys. We have here with us today Didier, Steve, Manu, and Peter, who will be talking about blockchain consortiums. Can you please take a moment to introduce yourself and explain what a blockchain consortium is in your opinion?
Didier Floch. I work for enterprise delivery and within ConsenSys. And for me, what is a consortium? Actually, it's a very complex question, so I'm going to try and answer it simply. It could be a group of companies who decide to build a venture to develop a new blockchain network and deliver applications on it. But it could also be sometimes a non-for-profit organization that is created for the purpose of building the infrastructure of the blockchain network and inviting third-party developers to build applications on it. So I think these are the two big categories that we see.
Hi everyone, Steve Cerveny, co-founder, CEO of Kaleido, which is the blockchain business cloud. And Kaleido is really an enterprise-grade infrastructure platform built expressly for these sorts of consortiums that are looking for solutions and trying to get their innovative business networks up and live. What a consortium is, we are once again guilty in the IT industry of recycling words and terms and overloading them. And so a consortium can, as Didier said, have more than one meeting. I think most generally it's the idea that a group of organizations will get together around a specific use case or set of use cases and form a business network. And in the blockchain space, that generally means setting up your own private blockchain network as part of that.
Hi, I'm Marchal, leading ConsenSys Solution, which is the consulting arm of ConsenSys, where we work with government, corporates and startups, help them develop business blockchain networks, which I think is another name for consortiums. The idea here is we can tie that to the topic of digital transformation. Many companies have gone on their digital transformation journey within the scope of their own companies, but rarely beyond the scope of their company. The notion of blockchain consortiums or business blockchain network is one where you make digital transformation happen between companies. And therefore, it's an important topic today, where we see many companies coming together to try to digitize further their operations.
Hi, I'm Pete Broadhurst, and I'm also from Kaleido. I'm one of the co-founders, and I head up the engineering team. So I guess the lens that I look at the world is through an engineering perspective. And what's interesting about the formation of these business networks that we're talking about as blockchain business networks or these blockchain-backed consortia is that the technology really matters. Because for the first time, these organizations are getting together and they're sharing some data. And they're breaking down a small brick in the wall of the silos that they've built between organizations for so many years in IT. And that small kernel that's slightly different in the technology, the fact that there's a tiny piece that's shared, changes everything else that happens inside of the consortium, which is what's so revolutionary and interesting about the space.
So you both talked about, I guess, where this has becoming now a reality because it's essentially having multiple companies working together on this. Can you please elaborate where you're starting to see this becoming a reality today?
Sure. So blockchain is very exciting for many industries. IDC, the analyst themselves said that there's going to be $2.9 billion of spending in blockchain this year. And recognize that that spending will happen first in finance and global trade. Specifically, in ConsenSys, we partner with companies in the supply chain and trade finance space, in particular Congo, which today has created the only production-grade commodity trade finance platform. So it's a platform that re-intermediates or digitizes trade finance between the banks and the corporates. And so global trade is clearly the first place where these consortiums are happening, are in production and delivering value.
What are some of the learnings from the Congo consortia so far?
One of the learning, for sure, is that governance is a complex topic. But I think where Congo has succeeded in that respect is bringing together such a significant part of the ecosystem from day one that the next step becomes easier. I think if you start too small, it's very hard to attract other people to the consortium building process. And in the case of Congo, there are already 10 banks straight from the beginning, a few energy companies, quite large energy companies. So it's much easier to build from that point onward. The reason why I mentioned that often consortium choose the path of creating a venture together is precisely to simplify this governance problem. So in the case of Congo, of course, we have there's a strong management team that has independence. They can take their own decisions. They report to a board, of course, but it gives them a lot of leeway to expand, create the infrastructure necessary to grow with more independence and therefore in a more efficient way.
And from Steve and Peter as well, is it safe to say then that the technology aspect is almost the simpler part than the governance frameworks? And what are you starting to see as trends through the efforts that you have?
Yeah, very, very good question. I think that what is interesting in this space is that it is a combination of technology and kind of human organizational problems or topics that must be addressed together. And if you think about it, no business exists in a vacuum. And so we're all connected today on Facebook personally, but a lot of times businesses networks are much bigger than ours are. And so, Gartner has said there's $3 trillion of trapped value in these inefficient, business networks, ecosystems that exist today that will be unlocked over the next decade. So we really are, as you were saying, at the dawn of the next wave of digital transformation where companies have spent billions trying to digitize internally their own processes, but really most of the inefficiencies are beyond the boundaries. It's those connection points. And so, the topic of consortium is really, it's about how do we evolve our business networks. And so, governance plays in, because it requires a deeper level of collaboration. If you're going to digitize and fix, and truly have the right amount of transparency and trust in this modern era across a large network, you need to collaborate more closely. And so that requires new innovative governance models and new structures that existing networks have to evolve towards. I think that's important because consortiums, we see them popping up all over the place. You were talking about, and Deloitte is also tracking those, 80% year on year. They're saying these consortiums are popping up. But it's important to know that, a lot of times these are existing players that are coming together and solving some age-old problems that they experience together.
I guess maybe what I would just add is that the governance, there's business governance, but there's also IT governance that really matters in these. It's as well as the technology being slightly different and the fact that the business model is about sharing some data and working together in a new collaborative way. It's also about building technology in a different way. These IT organizations are used to, for decades, having built IT in a way they have full control over every decision. They have full control over things like the risk and compliance of the solution within their IT organization. Now this is a solution that's being built collaboratively. Maybe it's collaborative open source. Maybe it's forming a separate entity that's going to create that engineering and share it. But everybody's going to have their own keys and their own data and need to contribute to the system. So that governance matters as much as the business governance does to make sure that you can actually go fast and deliver value to the business quickly. And we've seen so many of these consortia stall at a technology level because they haven't found a way to actually work together as IT organizations, which is part of what Kaleido is there to help solve.
That's a very good point. I mean, I think especially as you start thinking about, interoperability as well, because right now you're building, these technologies within consortiums, and obviously each company has specific also legacy systems, etc. So how do you think about interoperability within a consortia well, within a consortium and then within consortias?
So that's a very good question. So we see multiple consortia or business network coming online right now. They're all starting from addressing a very specific need. So for Congo, we're talking about commodity trade finance. Some are emerging on the logistic part of post-trade processing. And we see, for example, these networks leveraging each other. So in the case of VACT, which is about post-trade processing in energy market, they can connect to Congo when they need to finance the cargo. That's a great example of interoperability or integration between the networks. There's also integration with the backend systems. I think this one is easier because it's using what has been established in cloud computing for the last 10 years with the use of APIs. And so all these blockchain network use APIs to allow for simpler integration or simple integration with the backend systems. Then in the future, what's going to be interesting is interoperability between core blockchain technology. So today there's really 3 types of blockchain technology or DLT in use, Fabric, Ethereum, and Corda. There's a lot of work to make sure there's interoperability between these technologies so that assets created on one platform can be used on another one. And we're still at the prototyping and stage, but I think in a year's time, we're going to be there.
Great. And what are some of the top use cases that you're seeing within consortias besides trade finance?
So it's interesting to talk about that because there are other networks that have been created as not-for-profit organizations. So one of them is Energy Web Foundation. So essentially, they're trying to bring value to the energy industry and renewable energy industry by building application on the blockchain network. But it's a public blockchain network, so that's a slight distinction from the private case. We've seen VACT, of course. So VACT is interoperating with Congo. As Manu mentioned, it's a platform for the post-trade processing of oil physical trading. We now see the same thing happening in the agriculture commodities trading industry with a similar platform created by a consortium called ABCD. And then in the logistics space, there is for sure quite a lot of consortiums, and we'll see where it plays out.
Yeah, and referring back to that Deloitte study, they are tracking consortia across 10 or 11 industries. And the growth is across the board. So this really is a common set of problems about how companies, organizations connect and collaborate with each other in the 21st century. I did want to make a point earlier, though, that really blockchain is only 5%. We talk a lot about blockchain, and it is a really important 5% of the solution, I think. And it's an evolving space, and we're still inventing new ways to use it, especially in the enterprise arena. We talk a lot about privacy. There's more than one way to do privacy, for example. Very, very important constructs to enterprises to really going, big, large scale sort of mass market. So I did think that blockchain, especially looking backwards the last couple of years, has been the permission or the access to get people around the table. But now we're far enough through with some of these learnings to really see that what we need is more comprehensive solutions that look not just at that 5%, but at the next 50% around that. We see a whole stack of technologies emerging around blockchain. The same layers of a traditional stack, but new technologies infused into them. And so surely, things like interoperability that make a lot of sense. These new platforms that are breaking down walls, as Peter said, that existed organization to organization, surely won't build walls around themselves and kind of create a slightly larger fenced-in area. We really need to go all the way and look at things like interoperability. In my personal opinion, I think it's quite early in this space. I've seen several approaches talked about, prototyped, but you are getting into some very interesting problems, and luckily blockchain has attracted lots of cryptographers and fancy math people and so on, and so I do think we'll get there, but it will be, in my opinion, some time.
Are there emerging regulatory challenges, and what is the role of the government and public sector in somewhat, regulating data exchange and consortia?
So really depends on the type of asset that are being exchanged on these networks. For many, there's can be done without any regulators involved, because the only thing you're doing is operating within the existing boundaries of regulations. All you do is automating business processes. And so all the consortiums or networks that we see coming online right now are within that scope. But the question of regulator is interesting for new networks that also come online in the what we call DeFi or decentralized finance space, where a new form of assets are, or tokens are being put on these networks. And clearly here, it's very important to work closely with the regulator to understand what's feasible or not. Also, the regulators are in many places still have to express a clear opinion on where these assets fit, because the regulations were not designed necessarily with this new type of assets in mind. So I think that's a space that's still evolving. But the good thing is it's becoming clearer and clearer where the boundary is, so that people can operate in a safe manner.
Maybe just a slightly technical lens, thinking about all of the existing data regulation that exists today on IT systems. It doesn't go away just because the central database is now shared and called blockchain, and you have to think about where does the data reside, what's moving between countries, what can be deleted, what can't be deleted. All of those things still really matter, and to Steve's point earlier as to why the blockchain is just that kernel in the center, it means so much that the data actually needs to be obfuscated, hashed, made private, not actually part of the blockchain, but all of the transaction, the tokenization, if that's part of the solution, the proofs, etc., those are going to happen on the chain. So you have to think about very carefully the fact that any data you write today is going to matter in a year's time, in 2 years' time, when the regulations do catch up.
Well, great, thank you. We're coming up on time, but I wanted to maybe just end with, if each of you can give one trend that you foresee in the next 3 years within the context of blockchain consortia.
I think it's a pivotal moment because there's a lot of consortia that were created over the past sort of 2-3 years. And now comes the time to deliver value for all of the customers that they're trying to serve. And so scalability is a challenge that will be that needs to be on the mind of every consortium, and really growing, creating adoption, and delivering the value that was promised originally, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with scalability as the next topic. I do see it, the technology going much more mainstream. In addition to that, and I see these new technology stacks becoming much more consumable. We were talking recently about sort of the move, 20 years ago from sort of single-threaded computing to multi-threaded computing, and how that was really a special science for a number of years, and then all of a sudden it just got solved as the frameworks evolved and so on. So I think from the technology perspective, lots of evolution, and that really empowers companies to adopt at scale.
Mm-hmm. Slightly different maybe angle on the 5-year prediction. I see. So today the blockchain network that come online are mostly permission, or some are purely open, but usually not governed by corporations rather than by individuals or groups of individuals. I think in 5 years we'll see this permission network connecting to the mainnet, and use the mainnet as a way of exchanging value, just like intranet connected to the internet once it was understood well enough what were the security and boundaries between the two.
Yeah, Really agree with the points made. That sort of there's islands and then there's going to be bridges, and we're building the islands at the moment. I do think that maybe a really interesting trend at the moment is that we're discovering the value of tokenization beyond just cryptocurrencies and all of the things that it's been associated with in the last few years, and really now we're understanding the power that there is in just tracking and managing assets in a digital form. And I think that that's got a lot of innovation still to happen, how you tie on-chain assets to off-chain real things that exist and can be managed and tracked.
Well, great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.